Okay. Yes, so we will be presenting MOBA, and as Dimitra already introduced, the context is very different from the Swiss one. And we thought to start by sharing some insights in what makes this context specific, or what makes it different from Western Europe, where majority of cooperatives today are coming from, Western, even Southwestern Europe. I will share the screen and the presentation. Okay. So as I said, we will start with telling a little bit about the context and what is here as stated demand and supply mismatch of affordable housing in the Central and Southeast Europe. And here on this drawing, you see somewhere from some perspective countries that we will be speaking about. We will start, actually the start of this story is from a research that we across MOBA members did. We will tell a little bit more later about who are the MOBA members and all that, but that we as a MOBA and the number of organizations from Central and Southeastern Europe did in 2022. And it was, I think, really very new research, which was done on two aspects. One is what are the needs of people in terms of housing, and then the other one was the possibilities of financing new ways of affordable and cooperative housing in this region. And there will be a couple of slides with maybe a little bit boring look, but we will try to make it more interesting by telling what stands behind this. So somehow the features of the Central and Southeast European housing sector is on the first hand the housing quality issues, which are more pronounced than in the rest of Europe. On one hand, there is energy poverty among people. There are also informal settlements, which you would not meet in Switzerland or in the Netherlands. There is for the affordable housing, poverty rates are worse than in the rest of Europe. At least 20 to 30% of population is in housing poverty, including a lower middle class population. And also really specific, and I think this is comparable also to Greece, there is super home ownership regimes, which means that there is a very tiny residential public housing sector or rental sector, yes, and unregulated and unaffordable rental markets. And specific target groups in need are especially young people, also elderly people who, let's say, stay alone, and people who are in tenant status.
Maybe just to explain what it means, this unregulated rental markets. It means that although it's tiny, the rental market, people here on the rental market often don't have, for instance, a contract. It means that they're very vulnerable. The owner can basically kick you out at will at any moment. You have nothing to fall back to. So it's like you're very vulnerable in these conditions.
Yeah, and rent is done by private, which they rent. There are no big agencies or companies which are on the rental market. One of the also features of this region is the very high percent of young people who still live with their parents. So you can see here percentages, and we are living in Serbia, and Serbia has the highest percentages. 2/3 of young people under 34 live with their parents, and you can see that these percentages are really high. I don't know what is the situation in Greece. Probably comparable.
Even higher.
Yeah. And then another also maybe interesting thing to see is the tenancy structure. And this line here on these bars you see is the average EU tenancy. So somewhere around 30% of people are tenants. But in our part of Europe, there is less tenancy. And here, again, if you look at Serbia, it's like 14% tenants. Bosnia and Herzegovina, even 2.7%, which means that there is a lot of owners, but majority of owners are really poor. And this map here on the right side shows darker it is, there is a more, let's say, private ownership in hands of individuals. And then if you look at the features of the housing market in these countries, it's that these markets are very volatile, and especially since 2020, housing bubbles fueled by record levels of loan disbursement started to happen, and there is a relatively low loan penetration compared to other European countries because of the high risk of taking credit for people, which means that actually people cannot take credit. Many people cannot take credit for the apartments. Then here are some other features like rapidly increasing housing prices, rapidly expansion of loans, and high share of loans with variable interest rates. So maybe what is important to mention that banks that operate, for instance, in Serbia, but also really across the region, are mainly foreign banks. So there are hardly any local banks. And then these conditions are very harsh. And even the banks which serve as, let's say, ethical or even cooperative banks, for instance, in Austria and operate in Serbia, do not at all operate under same principles here. So the housing loan markets cannot fulfill housing needs in a sustainable way. And here is an interesting diagram. You can also find Athens here, somewhere in the middle of the chart. But what you can see, this dotted line is actually what we are primarily looking here at. And it is the price to income ratios in European capital cities. And you see that in Prague, this is the highest and the lowest in Nicosia. You see that in the top of the, most unaffordable are Prague, and then comes Paris, Bratislava, Warsaw, Zagreb, Budapest, Ljubljana. So basically, except Paris, all Eastern, Central European cities, which shows the urgency and the need for covering actually these needs in some different way than the market. So now, I mean, this was very abstract, and we wanted to show a little bit just what we speak, why these countries are so specific, and why MOBA is concentrating on countries which actually had socialist past until 1989 or 1991, in case of Yugoslavia. And we can see it here through the example of Belgrade. And this is an image from 1960s, which shows a new Belgrade, so a new expanded part of the city. And what you see on the image is a collective housing, apartment buildings with collective living with individual apartments, but developed through socialist model of contribution of employees of any like organization of people, work organization. It could be a factory, it could be a university, it could be a company. And from these collective funds, then the apartments were built and allocated to people under favorable rent. And this model covered about 40% of housing in Yugoslavia. So this is just one example of a neighborhood which was built in this period. So
it's a huge pool of collectively, as a society, collectively owned housing.
And then we came to the 1990s, and we still look at Belgrade, but the situation is very comparable across the whole Eastern Europe. The first privatization that happened was the privatization of the housing stock, which meant that apartments in which people used to live under this small rental were sold to them. It was not the case everywhere, I think not in East Germany, because they united with Western Germany, so there was a different model, but in all the other countries of Eastern Europe, this was the case. And people in the case of Serbia got a possibility to buy these apartments for very small amounts, today maybe comparable to 2,000–3,000 euros. Of course, they were paying this rent already for decades, some of them living for decades already in these apartments, some actually living in pretty new apartments. But what this wave of privatization made possible for, let's say, generation of our parents to become owners, for all the other generations, actually, it excluded us from a possibility to get to any form of organized housing provision. The funds which were existing, in some cases, maybe good example is Slovenia, were kept from selling these apartments and are still today used to allocate to social housing. In the case of Serbia, these funds completely disappeared, and the speculation, or the word goes that they were invested in the war which was going on, civil war which was going between different parts of Yugoslavia in the 1990s. So it completely disappeared. And for instance, in Serbia, we don't have any kind of fund for realization of social or affordable housing coming from the public sources. This situation in the 1990s then resulted, actually it started already before, but boomed and completely exploded in the 1990s and early 2000s, illegal construction on the edges of the city, not just building completely new buildings on empty land, but also extending existing buildings for a few floors, or most of this was done completely illegal, so without any permits. And today there is a huge, let's say, I mean, for a long time already process trying to, but not obviously wholeheartedly, to legalize this huge housing stock, which is today, I think, about 2 million buildings on the level of Serbia. And then we come to today, and Dimitra was recently in Belgrade and saw this in real. This is a few years back, start actually of the construction of a new exclusive neighborhood called Belgrade Waterfront, on a prime location in the city center, on the location of the former central railway station and on the riverfront. And this project was in 2014 proclaimed the project of national interest. It is done in alignment or collaboration with United Arab Emirates investors. The company is called Eagle Hills, and this company actually got a lease of this huge piece of land for a construction of mainly apartment buildings for free. And city of Belgrade is 30%, let's say, participating financially and in a gain from this whole, let's say, project. But the rest of the money goes abroad. And the apartments here are obviously not affordable for any average citizen. Maybe it's interesting just to mention that we have, since the start of the war in Ukraine, a huge influx of Russian and also, I guess, also Ukrainian people, because it's not very distinguishable, let's say, when you meet them on the street, who is who, but there is a large influx, and what you see, first in the beginning, you saw that this new population, there is about 100,000 people who came to Belgrade, which is a city of about 1.7 million. Many of them started to live in these newly built areas, which were actually mainly constructed for investment, not for living. But then they also realized that it's even for them too expensive, because these are people who came with money, and they started to move out of neighborhoods like Belgrade Waterfront. Maybe just to run very quickly, because we spoke about it in general, but just to see a few on case of Belgrade figures. So public housing stock in Belgrade itself from the last census is 0.65%. It was before 1%, so even diminished. It didn't grow. Market access is the 10% of population can afford to buy on the market. which means that they can take a loan in the bank, 90% cannot, and 20% can afford to rent. Only 5% of population is actually buying. So all that is sold, and there is a huge, like about 15,000 apartments produced a year. Production is bought by 5% of population, and 90% of this is in cash, which tells you that the apartments are not made for these people to live in, but as investment, as speculation, as sort of savings, because there are no smarter ways to save money. A rental price went with this, especially with this influx of new population immigrants because of the Ukrainian war, went, for instance, from 200 euro for one room apartment in 2017 to 450 in 2023. Housing overcrowding, we already mentioned. Housing is mainly built for nuclear families, so no for younger people, no for elderly, no for other non-binary families, only one typology. And as a result, actually, everyone there is housing policies not existing. Basically means that, especially in urban situations or bigger cities, everyone is left to themselves to find some kind of solution. And here we wanted to jump a little bit back in time and show actually that even for us as people who live here most of their life, the knowledge about housing cooperatives in the past, let's say, is very hidden in some way. And what is interesting is that we in Yugoslavia had housing cooperatives. And for instance, in early 1960s, from early 1960s until 1990s, there was 1,400 housing cooperatives operating across Yugoslavia, who were building about 5,000 to 8,000 apartments per year, or 10,000 family homes. And they were existing as a parallel system to the private ownership, which was already also existing, this societal ownership, which was some sort of a public housing, and this cooperative housing, which made about 8% of total housing fund. What was specific, let's say, about that cooperative model is that people would unite in a cooperative. Cooperative was sort of a construction company which would construct apartments for them. They would personally take a loan, which would be supported also from the company where they used to work. They would be paying out the loan, and when they paid completely out, they would become private owners of these apartments, which meant that once they did that, these apartments became also, I mean, especially from 90s on and today, became, went completely in the market and became also subject to speculation. These are some of the examples of what housing cooperatives built. So you can see that these are really large buildings. They not much different from housing production at that time. It was just the model of investment and getting together was different. Here, for instance, also you see houses in a row. So this was, let's say, on the periphery of the city, while in the city center, these were really large apartment buildings and also whole settlements that were built through cooperatives. Here, as the last of the data slides, we wanted to show the findings of this research that we did in 2022. We were interested in the 4 capital cities, which were the main focus, let's say, of our research: Ljubljana, Zagreb, Budapest, and Belgrade. What was attitude of people towards affordable rental models, with the question, if I had an option to rent a good apartment indefinitely for an affordable price, and if my rental rights were protected, it would be a good solution to my housing problems, and if they agree or disagree. And you see here that, for instance, in Ljubljana, there is a really large percentage of people that agreed with this. That in Belgrade, this number is the smallest, but still it's about quarter of people that agreed that they would live in permanently affordable rental housing where they have a say, let's say, which was very interesting for us, because once we started to work together as MOBA and on a collectively on the new cooperative housing model, our estimations were much lower. We were thinking that there is about 7-8% of people that would be interested in something like this.
So Anna took you through the, let's say, the specifics of the housing sector and the housing market in Central and Southeastern Europe, especially the, let's say, the difficulties which you encounter there if you're not already an owner but want to somehow enter that that housing sector. And she finished with the perspective, which in a way opened that there is at least an interest among a lot of people, quite a lot of people, for different approaches to the housing market than what we have today. And that's also where MOBA comes into the picture. So MOBA is active in most of the countries which you just saw in the image before. It's actually in Croatia and Slovenia, in Serbia, in Hungary, and in Czechia. And it's not that these are the only countries which would fit to, let's say, this look at a different or search for a different housing reality. But this is at the moment the group of countries which are on board. MOBA, most of the of the groups which are part of MOBA, and we'll see a little bit more about that soon, come from a background in, let's say, local housing action, often for many years, trying to figure out how to force a different reality in their own cities, how to deal with this unaffordability, how to deal with this high level of speculation, how to deal with the fact that there are a lot of that there's a lot of housing which basically doesn't fit the life realities of people. So that's where these initiatives, let's say, came from. And now in 2017, a bunch of us met actually in Berlin. And we had the instant click, which was very interesting. So it took us probably half an hour to understand that we are coming from countries in which we have like a lot of not only shared past, but also a shared today. And we might have a sort of a shared tomorrow, in that we could team up together, we could pool our capacities. We could, we could try to figure out together how to make a breakthrough in this housing situation which each of us encountered at home. And that was very important to have this moment, because if you're, let's say, on your own trying to to bang a different reality in your own cities, it's a very hard struggle, and it might feel like something which will never change. But once we met each other, we understood that there is a sort of a vibe, that there is a sort of like a momentum building. That was like for us, it was very very good and very important. So that brought us this brought us a lot of energy. And from that, network started, which quite quickly gained this name MOBA. MOBA means basically a sort of a self-help. It's something where you group together and you do something collectively. So not for the benefit of one person, but for the benefit of many persons.
It's a very old tradition in this part of the Balkans, where people come together to help each other to do the harvest, to finish a roof, to do something, and then they turn and help each other for free, I mean, as a volunteers.
Yeah, so this was a nice name for such a network. And not only on board came these housing initiatives, often from this housing activist background, but also a couple of other organizations like Overmont, World Habitat, and also interesting from Croatia, the Cooperative for Ethical Financing. And that especially this last one was sort of like, you could say sort of like an unusual sort of appearance among these housing organizations, that suddenly you have also a finance organization on board. So that was that's how we started. Then what MOBA is looking at is to develop a new way for this novel approach towards cooperative housing, which means that cooperative housing means here housing which is like in joint ownership. It stays in joint ownership. So that's a little bit different from the cooperatives Anna was speaking before, like during the time of Yugoslavia, where people would just come together as a sort of like construction company and then would end up basically with a privately owned apartments. Here we are looking at apartments which will stay indefinitely, forever, I would like to say, in collective ownership, and would therefore in that way also forever, let's say, secure, affordable, and I would also say safe or robust conditions for living, where you not only collectively own these apartments, but also you manage them collectively. What we decided to do within MOBA is to have some form of like compatibility about around what we in each of the countries are setting up, and this is like it's around a number of things which yeah, maybe they're obvious, but it's good to mention them. The housing is community led, so it's basically something which comes from the members. It is, as I said, in collective ownership. Members are also economically participating. In our case, this is in our region, that is, of course, it's a little bit limited because a lot of people have quite low savings, have low income compared to other regions of Europe, but this economic participation is important. And this model allows for a long-term, affordable, non-for-profit housing. So this is something which is like, it's the same among all our different MOBA members and initiatives. After we had been running for as a more or less informal network for a couple of years, in 2020 we decided to formalize MOBA, and we found a very interesting legal model for that. It's a European Cooperative Society. It's a cooperative of cooperatives. So as housing initiatives, housing cooperatives, we together formed a cooperative of all of us. We established it in Croatia. Yeah. So some of the things which we are doing and what are things which are very important for us is this like collectively learning from each other and supporting each other. You'll see also that all the different groups within MOBA have a little bit of a different route towards, you know, like how they imagine that they can get cooperative housing going in their countries. And that's also because the reality in these countries is a little bit different, despite all the shared, you know, like housing issues, history and stuff like that. Different groups see that there are different routes, so there is not sort of like one road to happiness only. There are different ways groups see how they could get there. But it's also meant that we recognize quite quickly that different groups have different talents, different capacities, different you know, expertises, stuff like that, and that there's a lot to learn from each other. And we are very open and very happy to share this among each other. That's like I think one of the key things in MOBA, and something which we are pretty determined about, to do that, to share with each other, to be as open as possible about all these things which we figured out. You know, like it's not so usual actually. So yeah, this is something which we really do. And what we think is very important is to help each other also to scale up and to scale out. And that sometimes means that we collectively try to help one particular group or initiative to make a small boost. You know, like, and this is something which might be even more important in the future. That maybe sometimes we decide to have a small break on some of our local initiatives in order to push one of us, you know, just over the threshold and to get things going. Here you see some of the current initiatives within the MOBA, let's say within the MOBA network, and we also speak about how they are part of these different paths within MOBA, because some of the groups set up quite elaborate ecosystems around their housing initiatives. Others try to push smaller projects as a sort of like how you call this, like icebreakers forward. So it's not all the same.
Maybe just here to say, because it's interesting, because of your competition, all that you see here are existing buildings that are used or will be used for cooperative living. So we will go in them into more detail, but I think it's good to notice that immediately.
Yeah. So we'll now we will walk you through actually what's happening in the different countries. First in Czechia. What is very interesting there from a MOBA perspective, and hopefully also from your perspective, is that they set up a sort of an umbrella organization, shared houses, Stilni Domen. And this is based on the German Mietshäuser Syndikat model. So it's compatible with the Mietshäuser approach. So they set up this organization, and from there they launch their different pilot projects. So it's a very structured approach to that.
It's a social cooperative as an organization, and it now has 3 members.
Yeah. So what is the advantage of such a structured approach is that you can obviously help new groups to find their way to move forward, and to be part of a larger system, instead of that they all have to figure out their own path in this quite challenging aspect of getting housing going. But then even within that, you have quite sort of like activist groups which are like banging forward. Like, for instance, here we are looking at a housing, basically a joint housing community in Džokić, in the west of Czechia, almost northwest, almost on the German border. And it's a group of people which first tried in Prague to their luck to get to a collective housing situation. Figured out that was very difficult and very expensive, and then in the end decided to settle for this place, and they bought themselves a villa from, actually it's formerly established by a chocolate magnate. This place ended up a little bit worn out. It was last in use as a sort of like support, social support situation for youngsters. Then got empty, and they managed to buy it. They managed to scratch together all the funds which they had from their own pocket, and I guess from friends and family and whatever was around it. They barely managed to get themselves into this. when we visited them last year, they had, they managed to get to the housing. They had no money to run the heating, but they managed to break their way into this situation. So I think this is
And
like
all the
quite
work,
great.
all the work is hands-on done by people who live there and with the large community of friends and neighbors.
Yeah. So this is, let's say, this is one way to do it. This is another way to do it. It's part of the same umbrella in Czechia, but it's a different situation. It's in Prague. It's a former hostel, which got bought by a group of people to establish their housing cooperative. And they managed to get funding from a German fund for majority. It's a loan for majority of the investment. It's much larger in its in scale, but also in the investment. 1.5 million euro just to buy the place. On top of that comes, I guess, 500,000 for the renovation. So this is substantially larger. They took much more time also because of that to prepare themselves to get into this. Yeah, but also they managed to get this going. Then we moved to Hungary, where a group of people got together, a little bit like the situation which you saw in this in the first villa, scratched together all what they could find, got loans from family and friends, and bought a house in which they are now living together. They were aware that it's probably not the textbook approach to setting up a cooperative, and in Austria or in Switzerland, definitely we wouldn't do it like that. But as a way to open this possibility for housing communities and to show that something like this is possible, it might be the smartest approach you could have. So they didn't set up a cooperative, they set up a different structure. They ambitioned to transition this into a cooperative, but they managed to get...
they transitioned it into an association,
yeah.
But in the beginning it was bought by a group of individuals.
Yeah. But what is important is that they managed to establish this collective housing, as an example, in Budapest. And they were part of a larger cooperative ecosystem, which is, I think, quite powerful and quite interesting in Hungary and in Budapest, in which they are setting up workspaces, workers' collectives, different organizations and cooperative businesses. And one of the things which they also set up is ACRED, this Alliance for Collaborative Real Estate Development. It's basically a non-for-profit alternative developer, which ambitions to help such projects as we are speaking about to get them going, and to help provide the knowledge, the insights, the support which is necessary for this. So that is very interesting that they have managed to set up such sort of structures to help groups, and not only themselves. And one of the first projects taken up by ACRED is now it's now like being rolled out. This is student housing, which is a collective development by ACRED. So this alternative non-for-profit real estate developer and local student association, and they're eyeing this former industrial building to buy it, maybe even to buy it in sections, so they could maybe even expand their ambition in the future, and to convert it into collaborative, collectively owned student housing. So we see that they are really pushing for these things to appear, and this is for us very exciting to look at.
Just to mention this, they submitted this as a project to new European Bauhaus Award for young talents. They got actually award for this project just like a month ago, less than a month ago.
Yeah, so that's nice. And then we go to Slovenia, where the MOBA member Zadrugator has again a little bit different approach. They put a lot of their effort actually in shaping a good regulatory context for housing. So they've been doing also a lot of advocacy. They've been working literally on proposals for a better housing law. So this is a different approach to, you know, like towards realizing this new wave of cooperative or community-led housing. So it's very different from these groups which are, you know, like scratching everything which is in their wallet, getting themselves into a housing and just showing like, yeah, we can do it. It might not have been the most perfect example, but we have it. This group has been spending a lot of their effort on creating proper conditions for groups to enter such a reality. And this is also sometimes frustrating because, you know, it's maybe a slower path. It's maybe a path where you know, like you're more dependent on you know, like election results and stuff like that. Sometimes, you know, like it's not easy to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Pardon, the light at the end of the tunnel. But on the other hand, it's, of course, it's also very important not just to create some sort of like one-offs, but to create conditions for all of us which are good and which are beneficial. But they also have their own projects with which they want to push in Ljubljana this pilots of a new cooperative housing, because also they understand it's very important to have the examples, to be able to go there, to see them, to smell them, to see, you know, like what it is like. So what they would like to realize is actually housing, a small housing project for seniors to open this new housing reality.
In an existing build.
In Zagreb, we have basically, or in Croatia, we have two groups which are very interesting and important. This cooperative for open architecture, you could say it's a sort of like it's an architecture firm as a cooperative. So a group of people are working there in a cooperative structure on architectural projects. So it's a different way of organizing your architecture office. And they work together with this cooperative for ethical financing. I mentioned it already. Cooperative for ethical financing is the project, you could say, to establish an ethical bank in Croatia, in our region, and now it's actually establishing a European ethical bank. So it's actually pan-European right now. But these two organizations teamed together and decided to push for new cooperative community-led housing in Croatia. And what is a little bit different again in their context is that they managed to get a good working relation with municipalities and with public authorities. In some of the other countries, that's not at all the case. So in the Croatian case, that is something which starts to work now, and that means that their access maybe to plots, to land, also, or even to finance might be different than some of the other than it's in the case of some of the other MOBA members, because it can be very beneficial when the municipality is there, you know, gives you access to a location, could be a guarantee for financing, or even a partner in EU financing projects and stuff like that. So that's their reality. And the first pilot which they are now looking at is a conversion of a former military building, sort of barracks, into housing in a smaller city in the vicinity of Zagreb. It's a quite larger project within the MOBA pilots. You see, it's quite different from this villa of the chocolate magnet. But yeah, it's you know, like if they manage to pull this off, it would be also a very interesting project. Also, what is interesting here is that it has a slightly different target of tenants, because this Križevci is sort of a satellite city of Zagreb. That means that a lot of the people who work actually in Križevci are actually commuting every day up and down to Zagreb, which means that the city of Križevci, or the town of Križevci basically lacks those people in part of, you know, like of the day and in the weekend, stuff like that. So it creates a very weird living condition for the city. And they would like to have those people not commuting every day up and down to the capital Zagreb, but to stay actually in the city.
And this project is part of the technological park, part of the whole area. So
that's quite, it's quite particular in this case. Yeah, here you see some of the plans. I'm not sure that we really have to walk through this.
But basically, they're at the moment waiting for construction permits and stuff like that. So there, what is, I mean, specific about this is that they prepared all the conditions for a prospective cooperative to come in. So there is no yet cooperative of people formed, but they prepared they did some sort of educational program with people, that they prepared the plans. There is a building available. There is even a financing available, but the group of people has to in some way come in still. And this model they're also proposing to other cities, and there are some other cities also interested in developing this form of cooperative housing.
So what you saw till now from these different pilots and these different groups is that they all have a slightly different approach, because their local realities are a bit different, or because they think that different route gives them a better possibility to get locally community-led cooperative housing pilots going. And that brings us then to Belgrade, where we are right now speaking to you.
So what we are busy with in the last year is, I mean, we have various paths that we took, started more than 10 years ago to work on new cooperative housing. But what we realized is that we need really to actually create a space in which the things are going to happen. So we decided somewhere 2 years ago to set up a center for new cooperative housing. And when I say we, it is an association which is called Ko-grad grad, or Who Builds the City, and a housing cooperative, Pametnije zgrade, or Smarter Building, which we as association help establish. And some of us, I mean, most of, actually all of us from the association are also members of the cooperative itself. And the interesting turn of events was last year, when we actually made a launch event and went on a search for a temporary space, or a space for this center to take place, that we got an offer from a friend to use on a, let's say, free basis space of ground floor of an architectural office for 2 years for the center actually, and projects to grow out of it. And here you can see a couple of images of the stuff which is happening there from October on. We have a really lively events happening each 2 weeks with a variety of topics. And now it's our, let's say, first season, just finishing. And what we managed already in these, let's say, more than 7-8 months that we are active, is to create a safe space and sort of incubator for collective imagination and action. And on the other hand, we also use the center to share the knowledge and experience that we as association have built in the last 10 years. So various tools, methods, examples, etc., as a base of building this collective understanding of what new cooperative housing in our context can be. Yeah.
Yes, and what sort of issues it should be addressing, because there are a lot of very inspiring examples of cooperative housing throughout Europe. But we, in a way, also try to understand, like, where are our societies maybe 10 years from now? Who is there? You know, like, for instance, here in Serbia, we have quite large exodus of young people. So maybe in 10 years, we're, you know, only old people here. So what do we do? You know, how do we prepare ourselves for such realities?
And also, this center is a place for pilot projects and community development, in a sense that it is a sort of a living room of a future cooperative. So what is happening now is that there is, through all these public events, a sort of a core group forming, new people who are joining, who are very enthusiastic to, in various forms, contribute to shape the activities, but also shape the future project. And it's really quite exciting. And our ambition is, let's say, that this center, which is now temporarily in this, let's say, donated space, that it in the next phase also becomes a combination of the center and the living. So what we hope for in the next stage is to acquire, or also on a similar basis like what we have now, get to a next stage, to a bigger space, which can be partially living and partially then the center and these public activities. And to jump now from these examples, we just wanted to share with you something which is really the part of MOBA which is very active and which I think is very innovative and also interesting for others. And there are also organizations from other really developed parts of Europe looking at what we are doing in these terms. So thanks also to participation of Cooperative for Ethical Financing in MOBA, we got really encouraged to go into a direction of actually forming tools to support financially these starting housing cooperatives, and somehow open this deadlock between finance and the needs of housing communities. What is this deadlock which we have at the moment is that there are no, as I mentioned in the very beginning, banks are not giving loans to cooperatives. You cannot go to a bank and as a cooperative ask for a loan in any of our countries. So that makes really hard for a small scale housing providers or cooperatives and groups to scale up. So all these examples which you see before are one-offs in Budapest, in Prague, in Dečin, because there was a foundation that gave money, because people managed to scrape money from all around. But this can happen with the very first group of super enthusiastic people which managed to motivate others. But for this to really move on, it's very difficult without banks, without financial support of institutions, etc. So there is some sort of a deadlock. And we realized that actually for this for MOBA, what the role of MOBA could be is to somehow financially support this. And we decided to establish a financing instrument for, of, and by the cooperatives, so that we as a collective form a fund into which we would invite others to contribute. And we call it MOBA Accelerator. MOBA Accelerator is at the moment at the, let's say, it had a small testing phase, but at this moment is actually preparing for a larger campaign to get on first-hand donations, where we are looking, let's say, for a first million to fill in the pot and to have a possibility to invest into a first project. This money would be returned then to MOBA, and then it can contribute after 3 years. So when the project is completed, and then other forms of finance can be found to support it from there on, and that and then in like a revolving way can contribute to the next projects. And then what we are looking for the next stages is to invite friendly organizations, like for instance, already organizations which are members of MOBA, like the Cooperative for Ethical Financing or World Habitat, to have shares in the organization or in the accelerator, which can then contribute as loans to realize projects. And on the longer term are also, we are thinking of bonds, which is a different relation to external partners. So it is quite ambitious. And also it's interesting that we got the support from a few foundations. One of them is ReArc, which is actually funded by IKEA to work on development of this accelerator. Mark is not agreeing with something which
I just wanted to say, so what is the key here is basically if you're in a context where you don't have banks which are providing you the financing to start and construct a housing, like a housing project, then maybe you have to fill that void and provide it yourself, that financing, that capital. So this is what we are doing, like giving short-term loans to groups to be able to get their building up and going. And once it's there, it's much safer for anyone to invest in it, because then you have this what they call asset up, so all the risky part of getting a project going is gone. Then it's much easier to get others on board to finance it. So in that case, like we can provide the capital to get to a group to get the project built. And then the group is in much better condition to ask others for a loan, and then MOBA can in a way get back that money and put it in the next project. So that is why that's why we think this could be very helpful in our context.
And on the longer run, I mean, on this drawing you see here under land and home acquisition. If all of this works well in this first stage and like a short-term borrowing, there is also an idea that MOBA could serve as a sort of a community land trust. So in a way, not in a way, but to secure the permanent locking of the properties. So if MOBA is the owner of the land and the local cooperatives are the owners of the buildings, then in that way it's double secure, let's say, this relationship. So yeah, I mean, we hope really that this will be a game changer also on the long term. So to demonstrate that the number of pilot developments in our region can happen and to set a wave of novel housing cooperatives, and also to trigger a shift in the existing housing market, so that hopefully from this also some others can realize that something else is possible than what is happening at the moment, and improve the housing opportunities in the region. And yeah, that's all what we have prepared. We can stop sharing.